Resources Board. Would staff please call roll?
Yes, good morning. Chair Bernstein.
Here.
And Board Member McKinnon.
Here.
Board Member Kohler.
Here.
Board Member Bauer.
Here.
Board Member Bunnenberg.
Here.
I may have missed a vice chair somewhere. Okay. Oh, Margaret. Well, Margaret Wimmer, absent for now. And Patricia DeCiso, thank you, is also absent. All right, moving along.
Okay, thank you. First on the agenda would be oral communications, where any members of the public would like to speak to us on any item not on the agenda. I do have one card from for oral communications for Gyeong Soon Bae. If she could come up to the microphone, please. Okay. And welcome.
Hi, good morning. I'm like a reporter.
If you can speak into the microphone a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Hello, good morning. I am a Korean daily newsletter reporter. So I'm so very interesting for like how can the American people taking ahead culture. So I'm gonna reporting for I introduced for my Korean newsletter. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
As Gyeong Soon Bae mentioned, she's a reporter for the Korean daily newsletter, and she expressed interest to come here today to observe how our community fosters cultural growth. So welcome and thank you. Okay, those are all the cards I have for oral communications. Next would be if there are any agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
None.
Okay, see none, thank you. City official reports. Any discussion? Yes.
Hi. So a couple days ago, Martin, Chair Bernstein, Matt Weintraub, the historic planner who is not able to be here today for reasons I'll say later, and I met regarding study sessions. And it's a topic that at the last meeting, I believe it was, the board had brought up and said we should agendize this. So we discussed agendizing, we discussed some pros and cons, some particular issues with, the mechanics and logistics. I should be closer to the mic for Beth, okay. We discussed study sessions and agendizing study sessions as a topic for the Historic Resources Board. So we will be looking towards July 14th or July 28th, which are the next couple of meetings that we have agenda items for, to have that discussion. We will prepare a brief report from staff on our evaluation of the possibilities. We had discussed possibly getting this into the HRB bylaws, and so that would be part of the discussion. And I don't know, Martin, if you want to add to that at this point, or?
It was just the part of that discussion also included is how does an applicant become notified of the possibility of a study session? So either it's at the development center or whenever there's a first contact by an applicant to any position in the city, how does that get noticed to that applicant that is available for them? So okay, that was it. Okay. All right, thank you so much. Okay, next then would be moving to our first action item, and that's regarding 450 Bryant Street. I'll read the topic, and then if staff can explain the purpose of today's meeting. And welcome, Vice Chair Wimmer. Welcome. Good. We know there was some traffic issues today. Yes, yes, good. So, okay, welcome. So we've just done official reports, and now we're just starting our first action item. So your timing is perfect, and welcome. So action item 450 Bryant Street, request by Lisa Hendrickson on behalf of Avenidas for historic review of architectural review application for the interior renovation of an existing historic building built in 1927 at 450 Bryant Street, demolition of an existing 2592 square foot addition in 1978, and replacement with a new 10,721 square foot addition, and site improvements on city-owned property in the Public Facilities PF zoning district. The net increase in floor area at the property is 8129 square feet. Environmental review, preparation of an initial study is underway. If staff shall explain the purpose of today's meeting, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Amy French, Chief Planning Official, and I just want to say this is not a study session. It is a formal application that's been filed for architectural review, which comes with it because of the historic status HRB review. It's a first hearing on this design. Staff did not request formal recommendation today because we are not ready for that from the HRB. It's a time for the HRB to learn about the project, to learn the site context, provide comments on the historic resource evaluation that was prepared by the applicant's consultant. Likewise, the analysis and review of that by our city consultant that we've hired in lieu of having Matt be the reviewing person. Matt is not able to participate in this item because his residence is too close to the property, so he's conflicted. And then also, if you as the Historic Resources Board can weigh in on the context, the neighborhood, the block, as you know, is this a historic or unique situation that we want to pay attention to with respect to the Architectural Review Board findings? There's one in particular, finding 4, that makes reference to whether the area is historic or unique. So we'd like to hear from you on that. And then, of course, an opportunity, as always, to provide input on the plans, the design. You'll hear from the applicants about the program. And then, whether you need some additional studies or design details to understand, what's going on there for this major addition. And then, of course, we will return to you following publication of the CEQA document. Under California Environmental Quality Act, we are preparing an environmental document because of the historic building, the size of the addition. It is not exempt from that state law. So I wanted to just touch upon the comprehensive plan. It does acknowledge and promote senior center. It's the central facility for seniors in Palo Alto. You'll hear from the applicant on that. We want to facilitate permits for these. We're doing our best to get it to you at an early time and to continue to come forward as expeditiously as possible per our comp plan. The city also, the comp plan references the Downtown Urban Design Guide. And this is not a mandatory set of guidelines, but it's intended to be very helpful for improvements in the downtown. This particular part of town is called the cross-access, right? The civic cross-access. It goes from City Hall all the way over to Cogswell Plaza. And in that area, it talks about the Mediterranean style of many buildings, and that future development should support, but not necessarily imitate this style. The direction there also talks about turning Cogswell Plaza into an outdoor room, an appealing space. I think there are several storied buildings, including the parking garage, surrounding Cogswell Plaza that is achieving that outdoor room with the taller buildings. This gives you a little bit of context here, a bird's eye view. It shows you Avenidas here, of course, the Category 2 building. There are some Category 3 buildings on University here. There are a couple of potentially eligible buildings that have not gone through the full analysis about their historic status. There's, of course, this Category 4 building over here, and this is called the Tinney building, where there is this mixed-use project that came along here that's very successful as far as it's complete now and occupied. And then, of course, the parking garage. So here's Cogswell Plaza. Okay, and then this is the city parking lot, Lot C. And, the lease that the city has with Avenidas, which is just basically around the building, includes some non-exclusive parking spaces over in Lot C, as well as some parking spaces along this alley. It's known as Paulson Lane. So basically, again, Avenidas is a major building. It's of regional importance. It's a California point of historical interest. And the HRB uses the Secretary of Interior standards, and we've been doing that since 1987. Your focus, of course, is the style, the design, the materials, et cetera. And again, as I mentioned, looking at this, what's the historical character, and is there one in this area, so that the Architecture Review Board can render a finding number 4 if that is applicable. Okay, so basically the Secretary of Interior standards recommend placing a new addition on a non-character defining elevation and limiting the size and scale in relationship to the historic building. So what we have here is an addition. And so basically, our consultant took a look at this project and the historic resource evaluation and came to the conclusion that the placement of the addition does not appear to overpower or obscure the historic building and its character-defining features. And then for this reason, the rear addition there appears to conform to the standards. So, of course, we want your opinion on that. I have some images here. This is the rear addition placed here rather than at the front, where the character-defining features of this front elevation are so important to the building. You can see the addition back here. It is taller than the existing building because it is 3 stories, but it is placed back from the main facade there. From the park, the Cogswell Plaza, as it's known as, this is the rear addition, and here it's really apparent that it's taller. But as you can see, the existing trees here have a role in screening that addition significantly from the view of the park users. So again, we're looking at the HRE and seeing that there might be some improvements that can be made. The applicant's consultant is here and has received that report from the city's consultant. And these are some items that have been identified. Again, the hearing process, coming here today, getting your input. Then we do have the opportunity to hear testimony. This is the first public hearing on the item. The applicant can tell you they are doing outreach, and there will be some meetings coming up they can tell you about for the public to come to Avenidas and hear directly from the applicant before you hear this again. Again, we need some guidance if you have some on the additional materials that might be needed for the next time you hear this. And then if you could continue as a vote, that's the action today, to a date certain, because again, this is the first formal hearing and we want to continue it to date uncertain, because we don't have the date identified just yet. And then down here, I have the next steps here. So it is going to go to the Architecture Review Board in a few weeks. Then we are looking at the CEQA document, preparing that. We're having a study session with council, though council does not have a role in the ARB process. Of course, they're interested because it's city property, et cetera. So we want to give them an opportunity to see the project, and there will be some future actions on their part. So that concludes staff's report.
Okay, thank you. Next step for us is if any board members have any disclosures to make about this agenda item. Board Member Bauer.
I've visited the site and when we last reviewed this project, and also I'm a friend of one of the Avenidas board members.
Okay. Member Bunenberg?
I have visited the site on a number of occasions, including the time when we did before. I'm not a member of Avenidas, but have many friends that attend there.
Yes, I went over there and toured the building when we first came before the board, and I used to take my mother there quite a bit on and off. So thank you.
I toured the building with the project architect and had that nice orientation about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also toured the building about a year ago.
Yes, good. And so did I. Also, I'd like to announce that on January 22nd of this year, so I met with Lisa Hendrickson, Avenidas past capital project manager, Amy Andonian, president and chief executive officer, and also Kevin Jones, architect. And at that meeting, all that happened there was I just quoted the comments made at our July 23rd, 2015 HRB meeting, and also quoted then the 10 standards, and then no decisions were made, and no new information is to report on that. So with that, why don't we open the public hearing, and I'd like to then invite the applicant for a presentation, please. And it's a 10-minute limitation or at the discretion of the chair. So whenever you're technically ready for our presentation, we can go ahead. Okay. And welcome.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Jones with Kenneth Rodriguez and Partners Architects. Pleasurable to be back in front of you. It's been a while since we were here last. We have a number of people associated with Avenidas here today, that Lisa Hendrickson and Amy and several of our board members are present, as well as ARG, our Historic Resources Group. So what I would like to do is to give you a little brief overview of what we've been doing over the course of the past year, and then largely leave some time, hopefully that there will be any specific questions you have about the historic document, and then I will allow Charles or Sarah to come to the podium and address those items. So with that, I'll kind of walk you through a little brief presentation. Much of what you know, the existing building is a Burge Clark building designed in 1926. I think it was constructed in 1927. Served as the city of Palo Alto police and fire station for a number of years. In the 70s, Avenidas opened their operation at this site as the city of Palo Alto Senior Center. Did basically an interior remodel at that time, removed any and all remaining historic fabric on the interior of the building, but the outside of the building has been maintained in very good shape and has not been really altered, with the exception of an addition that was added, and I'll talk to that in a moment. The diagram here relates to the elements of what the project consists of. The larger volume there you'll see is the main Burge Clark building. There's a smaller one-story shed building or carriage house building, or whatever we want to call that facility. And then this is a part of this addition that was added on to the building in the 70s. Our proposed concept, similar to what we brought to you before, was the idea of introducing an addition that was related to the park, related to the parking lot, maintained components of the existing courtyard, and as a result of the programmatic requirements for Avenidas and the square footage needs, we proposed a building that would be 3 stories. And so that facility addition resides here, and I'll kind of break this mass down for you in a moment. The existing courtyard, a lot of it remains, yet we do take a part of that courtyard to create this entry atrium element. The existing shed building stays, and then the Burge Clark original building is maintained as well. We propose no additions, modifications to the existing Burge Clark building. Our floor plan here and a quick concept, it's probably easier to look at it in this view. The Bryant Street entry here, this purple color is the actual original historic building, as well as the shed building. This is the addition that was added on, the dining room that was part of that. And our proposed project basically fills in this void with this connector element, this sort of glass connector piece that links the 2 buildings and tries to have a lighter connection to the building than some of our previous designs. This basically translates up as you go up to the 2nd floor. Similar feature, the existing Burge Clark building, the connector, which is a two-story element connecting the two-story Burge Clark building to the three-story proposed addition. Element only goes for 2 stories and basically stops underneath the eaves of the Burge Clark building. And we do not remove or those eaves, which was a part of a previous presentation to you about a year ago. And then the blue representation of the proposed addition. The addition largely has a series of 3 large rooms that stack on top of each other. The ground level room is a reconstruction of the dining hall. The second level is a wellness center, and then the third level is a fitness area. And then we have basically some building core elements. So the idea is that this building can basically kind of operate independent of the other one in terms of some of the programs, perhaps allowing for weekend use and a variety of other freedoms and flexibilities in terms of the offerings that Avenidas can provide. And then the very top of this, which is the third level, which would be only the new addition, and there's no connection to the existing building at this level. Our roof plan. And then we've maintained the courtyard, and at the third level created a exterior deck that would look out over the parking lot and the park as well. Some of the points that I wanted to bring up today, as I said, I would try to keep our points, comments kind of brief and take on some of the questions and commentary that we so appreciated from you last time. So the height difference between the 2 buildings, you can see there, it's about 6 feet different. Our proposed building is a 2-story, a 3-story building. The existing is a 2-story building. We focus on commentary we heard before about how the buildings come together and connect, and there's a glass connector, which I'll show you a little bit more detail on. In terms of the building materials and compatibility, we've spent some time looking at a material palette. I think there's a color board, material board floating around the dais. But basically what we're looking at is predominantly using limestone, which would be in a very tight joint pattern, probably a running bond pattern. This particular limestone doesn't have a lot of variation from piece to piece, so we would create a more monolithic look. We like that consistency with the existing building, which is really a concrete structure with a plaster finish on it. And we really feel much more excited about using the limestone as a compatible product to plaster, but creating the monolithic look. Our concern for plaster is basically the wear of it over time and cracking, and really feel that this would be a much more durable product and appealing and attractive product as well. The other elements are clear glass, aluminum window frames, flat clay roof tile in the same coloration of the existing barrel clay roof tile. I think that's on the board as well. And then trying to find ways to break the massing down in terms of having the slope roof, but a little bit of a shallower slope roof than the existing building. This large entry atrium area as you come in from the rear. One of the things that programmatically Avenidas has struggled with in the existing building is a sense of visibility and having the public understand what happens in the facility. And so as we look at this addition, a lot of the concepts that were talked about was making it more open and inviting, getting more light into the building and getting people having a sense of what really goes on here. The photograph you see here, representative of the appearance of the building from the Bryant Street. All of this is existing, no changes really proposed here. We would like to freshen up some of the landscaping here, put some bike racks rather, up in front here, and then you can sort of see the three-story addition rather in the backdrop. The view from the rear, the shed, again, freshening up the landscaping, creating some climbing vine treatments, some espalier plants against the face of the building here. Here's the stone product, as well as precast trim, creating a very light and glass open feeling for the third floor to make the appearance and massing of the building read much more strongly as sort of a two-story element, trying to maintain that compatibility. A view into the main entry lobby where you see this large two-story element, which would be our public art component, to be defined, but at this point we've sort of represented it in a very loose and freeway as a tree. And then the next two plates represent what one might see from Cogswell Plaza with the very mature and tall existing tree grove that's there. And then moving that away for the sake of clarity, seeing what the building actually does in terms of its architectural elements, this being the dining room, this being the wellness center, this being the fitness area on the third floor, all of which would have a very exciting and dramatic view into that tree grove, which we're really excited about having this feeling of kind of being in the trees in some ways. The glass connector element, which is right here, serves as this transition between the existing historic building and the proposed new addition. A repurposed patio area with landscape features, fountain, kind of a coffee bar area, seating, and that all connects to the interior of the proposed new addition. And Amy, can I get to the next documents, please? There's two other files in the file. Yes, it's a QuickTime. Sorry for the delay. I wanted to give you a little bit of a view of an animation that we worked on to give you a feel for what the experience might be as someone would visit the center. I'll maybe run this through twice. It moves a little fast for me to really talk through. Coming into the main lobby, creating kind of an open experience. We have something called the Tech Lab, which you get a view of here. Coming in from the back, the approach from the building from the rear parking lot, that large two-story element, the art wall piece coming into the door, heading towards the courtyard. And this idea in the background, you can see there, seeing the existing building wall and that wall being a component in the new design. This is a view of people enjoying the patio area. And then now you're walking in on this connector, this glass connector, seeing from front through the back of it. I'll run it back one more time just for clarity here. Where's your... the front of the building, the new addition, you really can't see it from this vantage point at all. All of the existing interior is remodeled. This is our tech lab here. Approaching it from the parking lot, you can see the relationship between these massing. Again, trying to break down the massing, getting this sense of openness that was really important to us, and seeing the activity that would be going on in the facility. And then coming in, and here you'd be approaching this is the existing rear wall of the Burge Clark building. There's an opening here that connects the circulation system off to the right, going into the patio. And this wall is basically a part of that glass connector that we've been referring to. And this would be the existing building wall here. Looking out, this glass component goes completely visually out to the park and creates this separation between the existing building and the new building. and then you come around again as if you're going back out, and you look into the first level, the dining room is a part of the new addition, and our stair is there to the other side. And that just gives you a quick conceptual feel for the interior layout. Can I get to the next? And then I just wanted to give you a feel for it coming the other way, because this is to put in context the experience as you're walking down Bryant Street, particularly in terms of what you see of the new building. You can see to the right a fairly substantial grove of trees that are here, and as this plays through, there's a small window in which you would see the addition in the back. And you're starting to come around now. You can start to see it at this point. The rendering that's adjacent to Amy. At that point, you'd see it in the background, and then as you move past it, you don't really experience that new addition from the primary Bryant Street focus. But we've tried to take in the sensitivity that you expressed the last time we were here in a number of items in terms of the treatment, the aesthetic design, and the elements that we focused on. So with that, I'd like to just step aside and try to address any questions or comments you might have. And if there are anything in particular that you have questions of our historic consultant, I'd like to invite them to the dais, or anyone else in terms of the Avenidas family. We would greatly appreciate your comments.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, I'd like to invite the board if there are any questions for the applicant or staff. Beth.
Yes, I had some questions about the little connector, because I remember last time we were concerned that the addition actually abutted closely and touched some historic features back on the back side of the building. Now then, for that little glass hyphen, you said that it would not actually touch the historic building, is that correct?
There is a seismic separation joint between the existing building and the new, and that glass connector, it does touch the building, but in the previous versions of this, we had proposed cutting part of the eave back, and that's been rethought. And if you look at our sheet A 5.4, there's the northwest elevation. It sort of gives you a viewpoint of that glass connector where it tucks up under the eave of the existing building. So that element is only a two-story component, but it does touch the building, but the buildings are seismically separated. It allows for the existing building and the new building to move without damaging or affecting
so
the
it's
other
the
one.
gentlest type of touch.
Yes.
And does that glass hyphen have a clear roof, or is there some? What is the covering of that roof?
The roof is a solid roof, so if you're on the second floor and you look up, you don't look through it. It is solid. Yes.
It is solid.
So it would be single ply roofing, and it's a steel frame construction. It has a metal deck to it and foam insulation, so it is solid.
All right.
To give you a better feel for that, if you looked at A 6.0, the section 2, you get a feel there for how that element tucks right up underneath the existing eave of the Burge Clark building. At the bottom of that sheet, the section 2, right there in the middle between the two buildings, that two-story connector element occurs
so that
there.
The roof, the tile roof extends over it,
yes,
but is not touched.
Is not touched.
Okay.
That's
a very important thing. Now then, what about the decorative fountain that exists there in the courtyard? It looked like in your presentation that there was maybe some kind of
The existing tile fountain that is in the courtyard today is proposed to be removed. It's not an original historic element, but we are taking it out. But so many of our participants have liked that fountain element and the sound that it creates. And so, as you noted, particularly in a little bit of the video, that we have proposed to put in a new fountain element.
So a water feature.
So there's a water feature there. There's a little coffee bar there, seating, new planting. And then we're really excited, too, for a component of our program called the Villages, which would be housed in that the smaller shed building, which would open up, the garden room would open out into that area and really create a very exciting and dynamic experience, different from what we have now.
And I was pleased to see, I should disclose that when I talked with people as I was, clients, as I was moving through the building, almost everyone said they liked the dining room. The dining room looking out on the plaza was their favorite room. So it appears that your dining room does look out on Cogwell.
Yes, it does. It fundamentally, its whole orientation focuses out to the Cogwell Plaza, the tree grove there. We would like to have a little more interaction between the interior of the building and the outside of the park, but due to some of the discussions about the lease lines and operations and the public park, we may be restricted in some ways, but clearly visually it is much more focused on the park than now.
A good visual connection there. And the other thing that is really more of a comment, your original plan had a great deal of glass on the back wall. And as a senior, I was thinking, I think I might like a little more privacy. There was almost a fishbowl feeling that people on the outside could look up and see what you were doing, whether it was exercise or whatever. And it looks like this design is much more, those areas are.
Yes, we've decreased the glazing amount in a significant way in this new design. And in all honesty, I'm really excited about where we've come relative to the commentary that we've heard on the previous design. It is very clear this design is completely different in appearance than where we have been before and the concepts that we had before. But I think that speaks to Avenidas' commitment to being responsive to the users, being responsive to the community, and trying to find happy medium that addresses those concerns, but also creates some excitement, allows us to get some spaces that can be well lit naturally, and create an environment that is appealing. And so we've heard those comments, and we've tried to take those and integrate them into a new design in a very new and exciting way, but still stick to the fundamentals that we feel people enjoy, having naturally lit spaces, and just looking out into that tree grove at the second, third level would just be an exciting component.
And to me, at least, the compatibility with the existing building is extremely important.
Yeah. We're going to continue with questions, and then we can make comments later. Okay. Board Member McKinnon.
Yes, I had just a couple of questions regarding the lease arrangement, and maybe these are more properly addressed to Amy French. There's not much said in here about the lease arrangement right here, the terms of the lease, the duration of the lease, and the responsibilities. Say the city had this is like a tenant improvement, it ends up being, and then the city has, if the project, say Avenidas went out of business, the city has to take over that property, becomes a city property. Could you elaborate on that?
I'm not well versed on the finer points of the lease. I do know that there is likely to be an adjustment to the lease, of course, because the building is proposed to be expanded, so there'll be more discussions on that. But I don't know. I cannot answer you today. I can come back at the next HRB meeting to answer that or research it and let you know.
Well, our group here intimately knows the
Well, then,
details of the
there you
lease
go.
if you're comfortable
were
with
on
us expressing them.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hendrickson. We recently last year signed a new 50-year lease with the city.
How many?
50.
50. Okay.
Right. So, under the terms of the lease, we are obligated to continue to operate as a provider of senior services in the property. And we have every intention of doing so for at least another 50 years. And yes, this would be considered TIs, and the lease does contemplate or anticipate that there would be improvements made to the building over the period, and this is permitted within the terms of the lease.
Okay, so it's a 50-year lease with a renewable option for another 50 years?
No, it's just 50 years.
50
My
years.
understanding the city could not have added a renewable option under its
So
charter.
at the end of the lease, the city becomes a city-owned
Unless we re-up, which
property.
we expect we will.
Unless something is done, yeah, okay.
Right. We have been in the building since the original lease was dated 1976,
Yeah.
and it was a 50-year lease. And we replaced that with another 50-year lease just last year.
Okay, thank you.
Members have a question? David?
So I'm wondering, I was somewhat shocked about the amount of money that Avenidas has to pay in lieu parking fees. I'm wondering if there's been a auto study.
I love it when Amy looks at me like that. Well, let me give you a little bit of background to this topic. When you look at the site plan, you realize there's a parking lot directly behind the project. And one of the dilemmas that has come about is this distinction between the lease line rights and the parking lot, and to that degree the park as well. And so when you go through the parking requirement here, we're required to provide a number of parking stalls. Through the past year since we were with you, the city has engaged with an outside consultant to study options to increase the amount of parking, as well as Avenidas has done those activities. The problem for Avenidas is we have no site to provide additional parking to, since our lease line is defined by the footprint of the building. The city had explored an option to upgrade the back parking lot, creating some underground parking and then some surface parking. That resulted in a net small gain in parking, and at the end of it indicated that it wasn't particularly a feasible option. So there is some proposed city, I don't remember the program that the city has that evaluates existing city parking lots from their maintenance and upkeep and keeping them renewed relative to code changes and access and those things. So there's likely to be some minor level of upgrade that's not associated with this particular project, because we've looked at all the options available to us. And the main thing that we can do, and we're, as you were, the lieu dollar fee is of issue, but that is our only option that's available to us in order to meet the parking demand.
So do you know how many cars come to Avenidas in a day?
There are statistics for that. Unfortunately, I don't have them freely available at this time.
I mean, my inclination is that there probably are fewer cars coming to Avenidas just because of maybe there's an answer there.
You're right. And we did do a parking study, and about 58% of the people that come every day drive their own cars. So more than 40% get there any number of other ways, all of which we've come to understand doesn't matter. There's still a parking requirement that has to be met. It's a function of the net new square footage that we're building. Sure. Separately, we do have a transportation plan that we'll be implementing to further reduce the number of single occupancy cars that drive to the building, but that is separate from our obligations to meet the parking requirement of the project.
Okay, just a question. I guess that's all the questions I have. I've got other comments.
Okay, any other board members with questions for the applicant or staff? Board member Wimmer, Vice Chair Wimmer.
I wanted to ask, there's like a freeze band that is occurring above the glass atrium at the rear entry, or that would be the
You're on the exterior?
the Ramona Street, yeah, off of the parking lot view with the tree.
Page 84.9.
And I just wanted you to speak a little bit about what your thoughts were on that material. And I see
At the third level?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
This area right here, that above the,
Yeah, here. Here.
it looks like a paneled.
Yes.
Looks kind of like a, and then I also noticed that same design element was incorporated into above the windows facing Cogswell Plaza off of the dining.
Yes.
And I just was curious about what that was. I think that's kind of a nice feature, and I like the fact that there's it looks to be like a balcony or a roof deck up there, which kind of probably makes up for the square footage that you might lose in the courtyard below. So I thought that was kind of a nice thought,
Okay.
an element.
Well, in the appearance which you see here of that treatment, it's at a 42-inch high height that creates basically the guardrail appearance of it. And so in lieu of creating what would be a much more transparent or guardrail scenario, we wanted to create something that felt more integrated to the building element. And so that element it started at this elevation as a component that had somewhat of a little bit of a decorative feel to it. And it served as this guardrail, and you would basically create that on two sides of the balcony, and people would have that experience of having that solid wall piece there, and then sort of from waist height up you would see people up on the balcony. And that does serve as another space for us as an exterior space that we don't have now, and it helps to offset some loss of area in the courtyard. Then that became just a decorative element on the other elevation to the park that we thought was kind of nice. It was intended to be an integrated aluminum frame system with all of these elements unified and creating sort of a single aesthetic that tried to make it feel light and airy.
I like how you incorporated it into more than just one elevation, so I thought that was nice. And then my second question was, can you describe a little bit about what's happening on the eave of the new roof overhang? Because it looks to be more visible, like when you look on A4.11 on that elevation, it seems like the eave is going to be more visible from the street level because it's up so high. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on treating that eave, and if it looks just like just a flat. I don't know what the material is.
Yeah, so the best place to sort of see a feel for this is on A6.3, the detail 5 there. That basically we have the flat tile roof coming to a gutter. We're not using copper. This would all be metal, sheet metal, painted, pre-painted, pre-finished material. And so we have a metal soffit that returns back to the glass. And one of the things we talked about and studied was this idea of how much level of articulation are we wanting to see. If you look at the existing building, you see some of the wood beams that are associated there. And so this is still, in some ways, a fairly modern aesthetic, but trying to pick up on some of the elements that are of historic nature. And we just felt that it was nicer to have a cleaner soffit element, because the third floor, we're really trying to create this illusion of transparency by having the clear glass, having this clean soffit, and having it sort of float up there so that the feeling of a three-story building is diminished.
Okay, so I was just thinking, I don't know, to pull in some of the historic. I know it's just a balance between the new and the historic, but I think it might be kind of neat to see some kind of
Yeah.
detail of a rafter tail, and maybe you can pull it off the window mullions that are occurring up at that level. I think that would give it a little bit of more of a texture interest.
Yeah, we're still in the phase of asking questions for the applicant, and then we'll have comments after we meet here from the public. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Any questions for the staff or applicant before we move to the questions for the public? Okay, seeing none. Okay, I do have one speaker card from a member of the public, David Hirsch. If you would welcome, and we usually limit the time for public comments for 5 minutes per speaker, so welcome.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the HRB. I'm an architect with many years' experience in New York City, during which I worked as principal on a number of significant historic projects. I'm a recent member of this community. My comments here result from seeing the earlier Avenidas illustrations in the newspaper, meeting with planning staff, attending earlier ARB meeting, studying the historic documents, meeting with Lisa Hendrickson, to tour the Burge Clark building, and examining the most recent presentation. If this were a matter of just one architect's taste versus another's, I wouldn't be here making this presentation. My opinion is that there has been a serious error of interpreting the Secretary of Interior standards of rehabilitation, which directly causes this proposal to be unacceptable. There's a minimal evidence in the Historic Resource Valuation Report accepted by the Planning Department to justify the retention of the garage structure at the rear of the 450 Bryant Street building. It is likely that this minimal structure was considered by Burge Clark as an insignificant addition and an afterthought based on a change in the program after the main building was designed and constructed. In the historic report's list of exterior character-defining features, this accessory building is the last feature out of the 14 listed, certainly less important than two-story height, symmetrical facade on Bryant Street, open eaves with decorative rafter tails, arched openings at ground level, balconies at upper floor, iron work including balcony railings, grills, and light fixtures. None of these significant features are characteristic of this one-story ancillary garage structure. Any attribution of historic authenticity to this garage cannot be justified by the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation as having distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that are characterized a property to be preserved. The only reason to consider its importance is that Burge Clark perhaps had a hand in its creation since it dates back to the same time frame. And it has no significance relative to the historic use which merits its retention today. What is much more important to any significant new addition to an historic structure is the 9th standard of historic preservation, quote, that the new addition shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, architectural features to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. Everyone recognizes the importance of the Avenidas expansion program. Of that, there is no question. However, Avenidas and their architects have been severely constrained by the historic report's recommendation regarding this one-story garage element. Once the historic consultants determined that the garage should be retained, and this board and the ARB and the Planning Department accepts this ruling as historically sacrosanct, the die is cast. No matter what is proposed, it will necessarily violate common sense design principles and damage the historic integrity of the Burge Clark building. You should certainly carefully review the impact of this new construction. At 3 stories, it blots out a significant portion of the historic building's roofline, designed to project on all sides of the original rectangular perimeter. At 3 stories, it overwhelms the 1-story garage as viewed from the parking lot, creating a ridiculous Mutt and Jeff relationship of scale and discontinuity. Although shown in one illustration from across Cogswell Park as though it is okay to be so prominent because it will be completely hidden from view behind a thicket of trees, the truth is it pokes out prominently beyond the Bryant Street view, overwhelming the scale of the original building, a disturbing intrusion relative to the lower scale Burge-Clark facade. It is inconceivable to me how the Historic Resources Evaluation Report can opine that the historic materials, features, size, proportion, and massing of the new addition are compatible with that of historic police and fire building. And your acceptance of this statement would be a mistaken judgment. None of this is necessary. If the garage is removed, the new construction could accommodate the entire Avenidas program and a two-story structure entirely behind the Burge-Clark building, scaled so that it will emphasize the importance of this historic building rather than detract from it. You must reject the recommendation of the Historic Resource Evaluation Report to retain the garage and ask Avenidas to submit a revised scheme without this limitation and more compatible with the scale of the historic Palo Alto building. Would that we could have Burge-Clark here to give credence to this critical evaluation. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Hirsch. That's the only other speaker card I've received. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. I'm going to leave the public hearing open, so in case there are any questions or comments from the applicant. Okay, bringing it back to the board. Comments or any other discussion items? Board Member Bauer.
So I'd like to compliment the architectural team for responding to a number of our concerns when you were here last. I actually think this is a much better project than the first one we saw, but I still have a couple of issues with the design. As the last speaker just discussed, I'm a little concerned about the height and the compatibility of the new addition to the existing building. And in particular, of course, the Secretary of Interior Standards number 9, which says that the new work shall be compatible with massing, size, scale, and architectural features. It's 6 feet taller, and that's a problem for me. And I understand the need for more space. I certainly support the expansion, but I do have some trouble with that. In addition, as I look at the elevations of the new addition, I'm troubled by the fact that it looks like the roof is floating above the building, because the connection between the building and the roof at the 3rd floor is an all-glass one. Now, I understand architecturally why that would be interesting and desirable, but to me it kind of looks like the roof is popped off and is hovering. And I cannot see that design being complementary or compatible to the existing building, which clearly, as that building moves from the 1st story to the 2nd, the 2nd story gets smaller and the roof becomes a kind of dominant feature. As Board Member Wimmer has pointed out, I was a little concerned as well about the railing on the 3rd floor balcony. The balcony is a nice space as I see it, but solid railings are not consistent with the open ironwork that's on the front of the building, and so maybe that could be rethought. I actually don't like that motif. That's not relevant. My personal taste is not part of this discussion, but I don't see that move, as it moves around to the side of the building. Don't understand that as an architectural feature. In addition, the window treatment of the new building is large pieces of glass. The existing building has multi-paned window openings, so there are a lot of small pieces of glass. Typically, in my limited experience, we would see some kind of, on the new addition, something that mimics but doesn't reproduce that multi-unit motif on the original building. So maybe larger panes of glass that were divided, but particularly as we see on the screen, there's a horizontal line at the sort of 2/3 of the way up those windows on the second floor, and maybe there's a vertical line, but it just doesn't seem to me to be enough of it's too different for me. I'm, excuse me, also concerned about the separation between the garage and the addition. The previous speaker brings up an interesting point, whether or not that building is actually retains enough of its original character to be considered historic. If it was a garage, it doesn't have any garage doors on it, and it's obviously been considerably remodeled and repurposed, and maybe that's a consideration. I think at this point in time, it's probably not a consideration. Too much money, too difficult. But if it's going to remain, it seems to me that glass atrium ought to have some space. I wouldn't think a lot, but it looks to me like the atrium comes right up to the edge of that building. So I think it should have a little more separation. And finally, I'm pleased to see that we had some a much better historic report, both in terms of ARG's presentation this week than we had in our previous meeting, which was really horrible. And I particularly liked the report by, what is it, Dudek, where they brought up again the issue in the second page of their review about whether the new addition is compatible with the existing building in terms of height, and their conclusion is it's not necessarily, it's fair to say, I'll quote them, that the new addition does not fall into the category of something that's not recommended. This is on page 94 of our packet. So those are my concerns about this project. Obviously, as I said, I'm in support of this expansion, and I think this is kind of tinkering around the edges. So thank you for bringing back a project to us that I think is more compatible with our previous comments.
Other board members? Board Member McKinnon.
Yes, I guess one thing that jumps out to me is your proposal for the limestone running bond surface treatment on one of the major buildings. In my opinion, is contextually incompatible with the historic fabric. And I would suggest that you come up with a better idea. The other suggestion I would have is it might be worthwhile to invest in a model of this whole project so we can see the interrelationships of the historic property with the proposed new project. I know this is not commonly done, but we do see it on complicated projects where there's interactions that occur and the effect upon historic properties. So that would be a second recommendation I would have for you.
Regarding the material of the limestone, what qualities of the limestone do you think it makes it incompatible?
Well, if we take a look at diagrams A5.2, 5.3, you can see it really jumps out as something severely different. And in my opinion, it looks like a prison. I mean, everybody has their own interpretation, but I think it looks like an old-time prison.
Yeah. I understand your comment, and I've also having to explain as an architect to clients a lot. Sometimes, and perhaps Mr. Jones will appreciate the same comment too, is that whenever there's a technical drawing showing joints, obviously the joints are shown in black ink, and then the limestone is shown in the color of the white paper. That's, as the applicant mentioned, that's not the intent of the design to have a black and white grid system there. So I think your idea of either a model or the photographs that the applicant have seen, then we won't see the black and white that is shown in A4.
Perhaps a piece of the material here put on so we can look at it in more detail.
It would be, what are these?
I mean,
Here it is.
I mean, a piece put together with several segments of the running bond.
There it is right there.
Now,
Okay,
I would put them together, though, so we can get a better idea.
great. Okay, okay,
Maybe you won't see the
the joints.
the joints there, as Martin's pointing out.
Yeah.
That might be the case, but we need to be educated if that be the case.
Got it, okay, good. All right, board member,
I too had the same concern until I saw the example that was brought in this morning. I'm particularly sensitive to this because the building at High Street in Hamilton that's just gone up had a limestone exterior, and I find it a shocking change from what we were presented. It looks to me like it has a big fur coat on the outside of the building. It's very rough. And this limestone, I think, is different. I'm assuming it's like 2 by 3 or such pretty big units. 12 by 24, okay. At any rate.
and the sample
so-
is smooth, I think.
Yeah, but it's
a smooth sample.
absolutely smooth sample.
What's wrong with just a stucco surface like the rest
Okay.
of the building? So
Yeah.
let's not get fancy.
Yeah,
Yeah, does this have an eased edge? Okay, so you see a little bit of the joint. Probably on a building that size, you wouldn't see much.
Okay.
Anyway,
Good.
I just wanted to add that comment.
all right, other board members' comments? Or discussion, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really quite a very nice presentation. And as I look at all the features that have been done, I'm not quite sure I could say there's anything that's really too negative. I mean, I like the garage staying, for one thing. As you can see in the picture that's on up there right now, you see the two people here in the parking lot looking over there. And from that view right there, you see almost the whole half of the original building that's behind the tree there, such that you almost all 4 sides of the original building can be seen from the front, both sides, and in the back you see at least about half of it. So, and then the garage provides a little kind of a very kind of private patio area behind it between the existing building and where the garage is now. And I like the line work that runs around the different levels of the building and the glass entry with the tree in there, whatever's going to be in there. I think it's just quite well done project, and it really works a lot better than the original project. But I think having the wall stucco, if this building is going to be with the stone exterior, I mean, that is really a nice exterior that we seldom see too often. Mostly it's always stucco, painted stucco. And to me, it's a huge, huge dramatic improvement. And basically, from the front and on both sides, you're going to see the existing building, and then in the back will be this addition, which will obviously be an addition. It's not trying to duplicate the building in the front, but it has lines that relate to the existing building, and I'm going to vote for it, that it's very good myself.
Thank you. Board Member Bunenberg.
Yes, I was thinking about the garage, and yes, it certainly is not as finished a design as all of the other parts, but it was a response to the need of the automobile, which was definitely becoming an item at that point in history. And it also, doesn't it serve as the place, there's always a need for a place to put the garbage cans, the green waste, the recyclables. Is that where those are placed, or? Do we know?
Okay.
Board members are saying no, not there.
4.2 shows.
Workstations, office,
Okay.
essentially interior space.
Oh, that,
Okay. So it sounds like, Beth, your comment is you're in favor of retaining that existing structure, correct?
I would think about retaining it
Yeah,
as,
okay,
important. And I do feel that it is basically compatible with the Secretary of Interior standards in terms of the comments about the little windows there on the second floor of the back of the building. I'm not sure whether recessing those windows a little bit more could give a little different treatment to that, and perhaps more.
Okay, so that's a comment to the applicant, right?
Okay.
Okay, good.
So those are my thoughts, but basically I feel like it's a muchly improved design, and I'm delighted to see it.
Okay, good. All right, any other board members? Board Member Wimmer, Vice Chair Wimmer.
I agree that I think this presentation took into account all of our concerns for the first review, and I think it's a lot more sensitive to the existing historic building, and I think it's a much more interesting, inviting, attractive building. I mean, I still think that third level with the frieze of all glass is I think that's going a little too modern, in my opinion. I would like to see some real windows up there, maybe an 8-inch, the windows spaced 8 inches apart, and giving yourself an opportunity to come up with some kind of a wood rafter tail detail between the windows. I think that might, for me, make it a little less modern, a little bit more complementary. But I think that balcony up there, I agree that I would feel more secure if that was a solid railing instead of an open iron railing, just for security reasons. But I'm feeling positive about the application.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to comment on one of the statements made by the applicant in the applicant's printed page. That's our packet, page 84. I'll just read it. It says, interior renovations are being designed to make the space feel open and inviting. We want visitors to be able to walk through the building and see what's going on and to be enticed to join in. And then I circled here, small spaces will combine into larger spaces. We also want pedestrians walking by on Bryant Street sidewalk to be able to look in and see what's going on. If you can turn to the proposed first floor plan on page A4.2 of your drawings, I'll make a comment in response to the goal of the applicant. So looking on the right-hand side of that page, it's the Bryant Street there. And so we see the multi-purpose room, the lobby, and then the age laboratory there. So certainly more visibility from Bryant Street. My question is, if you look further in the floor plan, right just below the space of the kitchen, looks like that's an existing corridor right there. And there's no name for that space there. And my question is to emphasize even more what the applicant statement made about the visibility. I do see between the dining room and a hallway leading to the back stairs, that's a glass partition, according to your legend. And if this little space immediately below the kitchen space, that's a former hallway right now. My question is, can that space not be defined by walls? Can that be eliminated? And then what I'm leading to is that from Bryant Street, and then if the risers on that back stair are transparent in some way, to get actually a view from Bryant Street all the way through the entire structure back toward Ramona Street. Would that be a possibility of a way to get even more transparency into the building? So that's just a question of what is that space? Because it's undefined. And, thank you.
The area you're referring to is intended to be a part of the kitchen expansion area. The kitchen currently is out of date in some ways and needs to be remodeled. So we haven't finalized all the interior arrangements, but I appreciate your comments, and that's something we can definitely look at. But at this stage, it was thought to be a part of the kitchen, basically a dishwashing area to accommodate a more functional kitchen.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I've done a number of commercial kitchens, and yes, it's sometimes the kitchens are the biggest spaces are in the whole facility. And then you can then just consider the idea of if those stair risers are somehow visible, transparent somehow, then we'd complete a view all the way through. Just a suggestion. As everyone in the public and the applicants heard on our July 23rd, 2015 comment about how the new addition is to be subordinate to the historic building, definitely this proposal that we're seeing today, I think, is definitely heading in that direction. If you look again on drawing on page A4.9, that's the rear view. The reason that I'm in supportive of this project compared to what we looked at last year about the idea of the massing is the third floor is basically just it's just a glazed wall rather than anything solid. And I did provide to the members, to the public and staff, just a little rendering about that. So maybe the architect can take a look at it too. Good, great. Yeah, and what I'm looking at is if you look at A4.9 and also the molding detail on page A6.3, and it's a detail 9. And because this is a review session, you can see how the architect put on, it says conceptual exterior details, not final here. And what I've done with this little rendering is showing the proposed conceptual cornice molding detail of about 14 inches roughly. There's no dimension, but something like that. And what this little rendering that I'm provided for the public and the applicant and the board members is showing even a stronger detail of that cornice molding. And as another comment to actually reduce the perceived mass and height of the three-story structure, so to emphasize even more that, look, this is a two-story structure that has some glazing up on an upper level. If you look on page A4.8, the previous page, you will see a very similar kind of cornice detail on a neighboring property. Look on the left-hand side of page A4.8. See, there's a very major cornice detail there. So if on A4.9 on the back, that was the genesis of the sketch that I provided for the public, staff, and the HRB and the applicant, showing a heavier detail there to really emphasize even more what the drawing on A4.9 is starting to suggest. Look, this is a two-story structure in perception. And I use the word perception because I think what the world sees is what we perceive it to be. So in other words, people aren't counting, oh, this is 48.87 inches or something tall. What's it visually look like? And by the idea of having this, the cornice and molding details as the drawings are starting to head in that direction, this is just an idea to even make that even a stronger idea. The main point I want to make, I think, on a lot of the comments that we're hearing about the aesthetics and other issues is that, and certainly this is part, and certainly my comment, is that there's no reduction in square footage, no change in floor plan, no change in functionality of the building, and just aesthetic issues to address some of the visual aspects. So I want to make that point that it's, if it's perceived to be less massive, well then how's that, that starts addressing the idea have compatibility with the neighborhood in terms of massing and scale. Okay, good. I have another comment. Was there any specific energy goals for this project? Any lead rating, or is that any goal for that project? Yeah.
The city's regulations for non-residential buildings here in town is Cal Green, and we have some energy reach requirements these days. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be a reasonable application to the new portion of the building to use those standards, mm-hmm. As opposed to the LEED silver certification process. So the city's been looking at this. For mm-hmm. city buildings, we typically require the LEED silver certification, mm-hmm. Which is kind of an equivalency to what we're requiring today. I think what we're requiring today may be more mm-hmm. Stringent than those standards. And because it is a long-term lease, we're looking at their request favorably to not have to go and certify with LEED, U.S. Green Building Council. Okay. But yes, there will be energy requirements and all of that for the new addition.
Okay, so that might tie into Board Member Bunnenberg's comment about the windows up on the second floor facing Ramona Street. Of the inset. I mean that's just get a little more shading on the glass, for example. So good. All right. I also have a comment on page A4.9, the rendering, and it's referring to the decorative panels on the top of the glass area there. And I did see that you had a similar kind of detail on the Cogswell Plaza facade, and I just my initial comment, and I circled it on that drawing, was either delete those features or significantly reduce the visual impact of it. My thought was that, are they really contributing to the compatibility with the historic structure, or do they start introducing a new element that doesn't exist anywhere on the historic structure? So I just either said delete or significantly reduce the visual impact of those. That was just a comment when I saw those here. And then also on that other comment I circled here on A4.9 was to help reduce the apparent height of the building or the mass of the building is with the glazed window system up on the third floor. If whatever detailing or coloration can be done to minimize that, and then also just to conclude my other comment about the rendering is emphasizing the second floor cornice detail and minimizing the third floor roof overhang. Just to kind of keep the building mass lower to get that perception that it's not a three-story building, but it's a two-story structure, visually speaking. Okay, those are my comments to date. Board Member Bauer.
I have one question for the architect. I'm just noting that on page A5.2, the elevation of the addition shows the windows as being down on the, let's see, this is the northwest elevation. It shows three windows wide, 3 high on the first floor. But then when I go over to page A6.3, suddenly I don't know where those windows are. Oh, I see. So the southeast elevation has a different window profile than the northwest. Okay. Because I saw that they were more divided, which actually is, I think, more compatible, and yet. So I think I'm wondering why they aren't. Why that motif doesn't actually move through the elevations. Mm-hmm. So the southeast seems to me to look more like the original building, and yet the northwest seems to be more modern, open, large pieces of glass.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, does the board have any, Board Member McKinnon?
Just one more question that popped up here on view drawing A4.9. Way in the top near the roof line. Am I looking at another building in the background, or is that like an elevator shaft?
That's the parking structure across the street.
Okay, that explains it, yeah.
Okay, that explains that. Good. All right. Okay, board members have any comment on the historic evaluation or the peer review historic evaluation? Board Member Bunbury.
Yes, just in general, I found the peer review very, very appropriate. I think that they managed to find the significant features, and just as a comment for the previous bit, I too think I like those smaller windows that were on the, not on the back side of the second floor, but on the more adjacent to the building. So I did not find any difficulties with the reports that we.
Board Member McKinnon.
Yes, just one additional congratulate the author on page 41 for the very explicit definition of the character-defining features of 450 Bryant Street, which is sometimes we do not see the character-defining features, but here they're clearly outlined. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good example to follow for other future projects.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, I think any other comments? We'll bring it back to the applicant to see if the applicant, invite the applicant if you'd like to make any closing comments. You're welcome to do so if you'd like to.
Well, I'd just like to thank the board today for your comments. You've been helpful when we were before you last time, and today you've done us a good service in terms of giving us your feedback and commentary, and our group looks forward to finding a way that we synthesize these comments into a framework that will gain your approval in the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Staff, do you have any comments or questions or requests from the board?
The logistical request would be if you could do me the favor of, at the end of this motion, second and continue to a date uncertain. That would be helpful. This is the first hearing for this project. And then if there was any discussion the board would want to have about, how we feel this area might be a historic area or unique, then I can help the ARB through that part. Obviously, this first meeting that they're going to have on the 16th, we're not going to come forward with findings because it's their first meeting as well. We won't be asking them to provide a recommendation or discuss the findings. But to that end, if you could maybe think about that, if you're not ready to say anything about that, or think about it now if you are, as to whether that type of concern exists on the block in the overall area, given the context.
Sure. Any board members like to? Board Member Bunbury.
Yes, that's an extremely important point. Thank you very much. That this to me is an area of surrounding architectural structures that are also historic, and it is very important to maintain that whole axis and area of historic structures. This is something that sometimes gets missed and has recently caused some difficulties because of lack of considering of the nearby structures. So I think that's a very important point to stress, and certainly to move to a date uncertain appears to be.
Board Member Bauer.
Amy, I'm in the Dudick report. They, in their summary of review, page 94, they raised the question about whether this building should be considered the characteristics. I'm sorry. that we shouldn't have a conversation about whether this building is eligible for historic registry of the National Registry of Historic Buildings. I wonder if that's a consideration for future hearing, or at what point would that be appropriate? Because they're referring to some language in the ARG report which hints at that but doesn't really resolve it.
I think for our, it's mostly for our environmental review process to make sure that these things are addressed fully in that analysis, so that we are, doing our due diligence on our environmental review. Yeah, so I'm not really sure to help.
Okay. Regarding the peer review of the historic resource evaluation on our packet, page 93, section 8.4. I think this is really important to be part of our record of that regarding the recommendation by the peer reviewer that the construction protection plan be part of the final construction drawings. That's the first bullet of 8.4. Okay. And then whenever things are going to be decided during construction, that there be a comment on how are those things reviewed and decided upon. But the main thing is on 8.4, which is on packet page 93, is that in the final construction drawings, that a construction protection plan of the historic resource be a requirement for those drawings. So, okay. Okay, and then a question for Amy for this recommendation. Would that require a motion and a second and a vote, or is that okay to do? Or yeah.
Again, it's not a date certain, so
okay.
we are going to re-advertise,
okay.
but it's just helpful to
okay, sure.
the process. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to move that the HRB well, I'll just read the recommendation and see if that's agreed to. It is recommended that the Historic Resources Board take the following actions: review and provide input on the attached historic resource evaluation and plans for the Avenidas project, which we have just completed, and that we continue the hearing to a date uncertain. Is that in agreement by the board? All those in favor saying aye? Aye. Okay, that passed. We agree to that. Okay. Anything else that the staff needs from us on this agenda?
No, this is great. Thank you so much for your efforts on this.
Okay, and the Avenidas team, thank you very much for your very wonderful presentation, and I think we're moving in a good direction. So, good. And with that, this agenda item is completed. Thank you very much. Okay. Board Member Bauer.
Just a comment. I want to compliment the staff on this presentation of materials. It's bound, it's indexed, it's numbered by each page. It was very much, is a lot easier for us, I think, as we are discussing this, to be able to refer to a page. It's all in one place. We're not losing all of the different things. So I would encourage this in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Next on our agenda item is approval of minutes of May 12, 2016. Any motion to approve or amend? Board Member Bauer.
So I reviewed the minutes, and we had a lively discussion with the applicant. And the minutes, I think, reflect that discussion. But in some cases, I thought that the minutes actually could have been streamlined, maybe, so that the grammar was better.
It's on page 97, Roger.
It's really not a criticism, but it looked to me like somebody, maybe an automated service, just took the recording and transcribed it.
Okay. So as far as our action to do on these minutes, do you want to, so either we can make some proposed amendments and vote on those, or?
So I guess I would move to accept them with the understanding that this isn't I don't think this is a verbatim. The minutes convey the information we discussed with the clients, but I think it's not entirely accurate.
Okay. There's a motion to accept these. Is there a second?
I would like to make a comment before
Okay.
deciding, because we have in the past also said that sometimes the sense minutes got so brief that they didn't capture the individual opinions that were expressed, and we were not always unanimous in what we were saying. So I would caution that I don't want to go back to seeing the board heard it, moved and seconded this motion, and that's it. And the sense minutes began to look that way. So,
So we still have a motion that doesn't have a second yet to approve the minutes. Okay, it's been seconded. Any discussion before we vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
no.
And I'm sorry, I misspoke. There are Board Member Bauer, Kohler, Wimmer, Bernstein, and McKinnon voted yes. Board Member Bunenberg voted no on the approval of the minutes, but that does pass. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is subcommittee items. I see none. Board member questions, comments, and announcements. Board Member McKinnon.
Yes, are we scheduled for a meeting on the 9th?
No, we are not scheduled for a meeting on the 9th. I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have in front of me the upcoming schedule. I believe that, I know we're canceling June 23rd. I'm going to have to send an email out to confirm. I don't want to say it in the public hearing about that it's canceled, because it may very well have been advertised and I'm just not aware.
Okay, so maybe none for the 23rd, but
yeah, I believe we're canceling the 23rd. I know we're meeting in July. I'm kind of that far ahead, but
okay.
All right.
Could you?
I'll verify and send an email out to the entire board as to the status of that meeting.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions, announcements by the board? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.